What's going on, everyone? In this video, I'll be going over the top 20 potential setups that I see for this upcoming week. A lot of them have to do with earnings reports and sympathy plays from those earnings reports. So let's just get right into it. We have Tesla to start out. It does have earnings Monday and after hours, and as you can see, we are forming a pinch point on the daily time frame. And just to take note real quick that all of these that I'll be going over will be on the daily time frame. So as you can see, it is pinching and we are testing the downtrending resistance right here. So if we do break out of this downtrending resistance, I also have a level at 780, and I'd like to see if we could break that level. Now we do have a volume shelf that ends between 840, so we have this volume gap from volume shelves that ends at 840 and starts at 740. So basically, just to break this down real quick, what the volume shelves show are just how many shares are being held at a particular price point. So with this volume gap, there's not too many shares being held between 740 and 840. So we could see a quick move to the upside if this downtrending resistance is broken and if this 780 level is broken due to the potential of a good earnings report. Now, if that does not happen, we are above these 20 and 50 SMAs. So I'd like to see if we could potentially hold this 700 level and hold above these SMAs. Now, if that doesn't happen, we do have this uptrending support line that I'd like to see hold. And overall, if it doesn't, this support line is going to be around the 650 to 640 range. So if we do break down below those levels, then we could see a nice move down. That would be a pretty dramatic move. So I doubt that we will see that strong of a move to the downside if we do have a bad report. But overall, that is what I'm looking for on Tesla. Now, the next stock that I'm going to be looking at is AMKR. This is a semiconductor stock that has been performing quite well recently. And as you can see, it broke out of a pinch point and it regained after it did have a strong move up, and then it kind of fizzled out, and then we did come back to bounce off this uptrending support line. So right here, we do have a resistance at 24.21. I'd like to see if we could break that and then regain this 20 SMA and then continue to push and get above this volume shelf at 26 and then potentially push for new all-time highs. If that doesn't happen, I'd like to see if we do break this uptrending support line, we could actually see quite a strong move to the downside and possibly fill this gap that was formed when we did make a strong move up in February. So it did not get completely filled. So I'd like to see if we could fill it, which it is around 1950, and then we could potentially hold around here. So the next one we're going to go over is going to be UPS. This stock has been performing quite well and just broke out of a range. So when we look at this, it was range bound since August 7th of 2020. We did just break out and we are holding above this upper end of the range. So we could use this 176 to 177 level as a support level. If we do have good earnings, which is Tuesday in pre-market, if we do have good earnings, then we could potentially push for new all-time highs. If we have bad earnings, I'd like to see if we pull back. If we do hold this 176 level, that'd be nice to see. If not, I'd like to see if we pull back to the 20 SMA, which is around the 175 area, and then we do have a 50 SMA around the 167 area. So those are going to be the next levels of support that I'm going to look for. The 167 level has a good level of support, and overall those are the levels I'm watching for UPS. Now for the next one, we have CROX. This is reporting Tuesday in pre-market as well. This is also range bound. So the range was formed since, let's see what date this is, January 11th of this year. So it's been range bound since then, and we are testing this upper end of the range. We could see a breakout and then continuation for new all-time highs. So if we do have a good earnings report, then I'd like to see a push and hold. I'd like to see good volume backing this move. If not, I'd like to see if we could come back and hold this 79 level to 80 level, and that is where our SMAs are. All right, so the next one that we're going to go over is AMD. AMD could see a sympathy play from the AMKR earnings. The AMKR, that is a smaller company. I believe it is between the 2 billion to 10 billion market cap level, so it's not as big as AMD, so I doubt we'll see much of a sympathy play from the AMKR earnings, but they are both in the same industry, seen as they are semiconductor companies. So we could see an earnings report from AMKR that does affect the price in AMD. But AMD is looking interesting here. We are potentially forming a descending triangle with this downtrending resistance right here, and then we do have this level of 87.29 right here as a resistance. So we have regained our moving averages, and I'd like to see if we could break out of this downtrending resistance and potentially push and actually go and fill this volume gap to around the 91 area. So we do have a volume gap between 84 to 91. So if we do break this downtrending resistance, we could see a very strong move if we do have a good earnings report from AMD, and also if AMKR does have a good earnings as well. If that doesn't happen, then I'd like to see if we could hold this $80 level where our 20 SMA is. And then we also have a level all the way down here at 74. So if we do have a very bad earnings, I'd like to see if we could potentially come back and retest this area as well. All right, for our next stock, we have, let's see here. We have Microsoft. Microsoft has been performing very well as well. So when we look at Microsoft, we did break out for new all-time highs, and we are holding these levels quite well. So let me just zoom out real quick. We did break out for new all-time highs, and we are holding quite well around this 256 to 260 area. I would like to see if we do have good earnings, if we could push to the upside for new all-time highs and see a strong continuation play. If not, we do have a volume gap between 256 to around this 242 level. So I would like to see if we could potentially fill that volume gap and actually hold this 242 level quite well. So that is what I'm looking for on Microsoft. Our next one we're going to go over is Pens. Snap did report last weekend, and we did have a good report from Snap, and I believe there was some good guidance. I know that they beat revenue by 66% from the previous quarter, I believe. So this one did see a sympathy play from Snap's earnings. I would like to see if we could potentially hold and break this 750, or my apologies, this $75 level. So if we break that and we do have good earnings, I'd like to see if we get rejected by these moving averages around 77. If we do, then I'd like to see if we hold this uptrending support. If we don't, then I'd like to see if we could continue on and potentially push to around this $83 to $84 range. We do have a volume gap between 74 to 75, all the way up to around this $83 to $84 level. So if we do have a good earnings, we could see a nice strong move up to this 84 level. And then I would say we could potentially see some stagnation in price or a rejection. But if we do not see a good earnings report, then I'd like to see if we break this uptrending support line and if we can actually hold this 68 to 69 support level. Alrighty, now we will go over Google. This one's been very strong as well and has been showing some very good earnings since the pandemic started. So we did have this range that was forming since February 2nd to around April 1st, and we did just break out of that recently. So I would like to see if we can actually get a good earnings. I'd like to see a continuation play for new all-time highs. We did make new all-time highs this previous Friday. So I would like to see if we could actually see a continuation play. If the market's strong, I feel like we could actually have a good probability of that happening. And if we do get some good earnings, then we could potentially continue on and continue to push. Now, if we don't, I'd like to see if we could hold this 22.36 level. If not, we do have a volume gap between 22.36 to around this 21.29 level. So I'd like to see if we could actually move all the way back down here and hold around this level, as our 50 SMA is around this level as well. Alrighty, and then the next one we're going to go over is going to be Boeing. So the airlines, or at least a lot of them, did report last week, and they did have narrower than expected losses. That's quite a hard word to say. But we did see that they performed quite well, and they are raising guidance. So the opening play is looking very strong. I would like to see if Boeing could report a good earnings. We are seeing somewhat of a descending triangle action as well on Boeing, as we are holding this 230 range quite well. and we are seeing this downtrending resistance right here. So if we do get good earnings, then I'd like to see if we can actually get above this 50 SMA, if we can then get above this 20 SMA, and then potentially get above this downtrending resistance and break out and potentially test new highs after this COVID pandemic pullback. So the highs are going to be around 27.80, or my apologies, 278.50. So if we do actually break this downtrending resistance, then that is going to be the next level that I actually look for. We do have this volume gap ending around 261. So I'd make note of that, but if we do not get good earnings, then I'd like to see if we can break this 230 level and potentially come back down to this 217 level where our next very strong volume gap is. So the next one that we're going to go over is Apple. They have earnings reports Wednesday and after hours. We have Boeing, that's going to be Wednesday in pre-market. Google is Tuesday and after hours. Pens is Tuesday and after hours. Microsoft Tuesday after hours. AMD Tuesday after hours, if I did not go over those already. All right, so Apple is going to be Wednesday and after hours. This one's looking quite interesting as well. We are seeing a pinch point form in this one as well. So if we do see bad earnings, I'd like to see if we could hold this 128.56 level and hold this 20 SMA. We also have this 50 SMA around the 127 area. But overall, we have this downtrending resistance. I'd like to see if we could break out of it and then potentially break out of this 137.84 level, which would be pretty much the end of the volume shelf. So we don't have many shares being held up here. So we could see a very nice strong move to the upside and potentially see new all-time highs if these levels are broken. Now, like I said, if we do see bad earnings, then I'd like to see if 128.56 could hold. If not, we do have a volume shelf at 123. So I'd like to see if that area could hold, and then we do have this uptrending support line. All right, now we can go over Facebook, which has earnings Wednesday after hours. This could see a sympathy play from Pens, which is reporting on Tuesday and after hours. So they are both social media stocks. So I'd like to see if we do get a sympathy play from Pinterest from the Tuesday after hours report. But we do have earnings on Facebook Wednesday and after hours. So we'll go over Facebook real quick. This has been a decently strong stock that just broke out. So as you can see, we just broke out for new all-time highs. However, we are retracing. I'd like to see if we can actually hold this level. I am seeing, just real quick, that we are seeing somewhat of a falling wedge. So I just want to put that in real quick. So we are seeing somewhat of a falling wedge, so I'd like to see if we could break out of that to the upside. If we do have good reports from Pens and Facebook, we could potentially break out of that and see new all-time highs. Now, if that doesn't happen, we see a bad earnings report, then I'd like to see if we can come back down to this 50 SMA, which is around 282, and then we do have the very strong volume shelf around 278. So if we do see bad earnings, that's what I'd be looking for. If we see good earnings and a reflection of that in the price action, then I'd be looking to see if we can break this falling wedge and break out to the upside and potentially make new all-time highs. Alrighty, Amazon is reporting Thursday and after hours. We could see, we could see a sympathy play from Shopify has earnings report. I believe it's Wednesday. So we could see a sympathy play from Shopify earnings on Amazon. So I'd be watching out for that as well. But we do have earnings on Thursday for Amazon. This one is looking like we did break out of this downtrending resistance from a while ago, and we are holding above it. Right now, it does look like we rejected this 3,448 or 3,445 level. So I'd like to see if we do get good earnings, if we can actually come back and hold this 3,341 level, and then potentially push and break this level right here that I just went over. We are above the 20 SMA and 50 SMA. So I'd like to see if we do get good earnings, if we can actually break out. And this is somewhat of a range trade and has been range trading since July 2nd of 2020. So I'd like to see if we could break this 3,445 level and then push for new all-time highs if we do get a good earnings report and a good reaction from that. If not, I'd like to see if we could come back down to this 3270 area. If not, we do have this SMA, this 50 SMA around 3179. We do have a big volume shelf around 3217, another one around 3250, and then another one around 3182. So that's what I'd be looking for downside price action. For upside, I'd obviously be looking to break this resistance right here and then potentially push for new all-time highs. Alrighty, and then we have NEO. So we could see a sympathy play from Tesla earnings on Monday and after hours. And then we do have NEO earnings Thursday and after hours as well. So we'll go over this real quick. This one's looking interesting. We did just break this downtrending resistance, and I would like to see if we could actually come and break this 4250 area and then actually break this 50 SMA and then break the pullback high from 4650. So I'd like to see if we could break those levels. The volume shelf ends around 4879 and then volume kind of dries up after that. But if we do not break those levels and we see bad earnings or a bad reaction to earnings, then I'd like to see if we could come back and retrace and potentially hold this 20 SMA around 3814. Now we do have a very strong support around 34. So if we don't hold this 20 SMA, then I'd like to see if we could come and potentially hold this $34 mark. Alrighty, and then Twitter. So Twitter could see a sympathy play from Pens and Facebook. It did see a sympathy play from the Snap earnings, and so did Pens, Facebook. So those could see sympathy plays. I'd like to go over Twitter real quick for you. This one's looking interesting as well. We are pinching as we are holding this uptrending support line. We have tested it and we are just briefly holding it, and we are right below this 20 SMA and this 50 SMA. So I'd like to see if we do get good earnings and if Facebook and Pens report good earnings, if we could see that we break this downtrending resistance and this 72 level and then potentially push for new highs. If not, we do have this uptrending support line, and I would expect that this could potentially fail if we do have bad earnings. So we do have a volume gap between 64 to this 55 level. I'd like to see if we do have bad earnings, if this 59.71 area could hold. If not, then I'd look to be seeing if this 55 area gets filled for this volume gap. Alrighty, and then the next level that I'd be looking for is or the next stock that we're going to be looking at is Snap. So Snap obviously could see sympathy plays from Facebook, Pens, and Twitter earnings. This one just did have a good earnings, and it is pinching as well. So is testing this downtrending resistance right here. We do have a level around 65.40 and another support level around 61.34. So I'd like to see if we could break 65.40. The volume shelves do end around there, so there's not many shares being held up here. So we could see that if we break this downtrending resistance and this 65.40 level, that we could see a nice push to the upside and potentially see new all-time highs if we do get good sympathy plays from these others, as in Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest. Now, if that does not happen, I'd like to see if this uptrending support line does hold, and if this $57 mark could hold as well. Now, we do have a 50 SMA around this $60 mark, and we do have the 20 SMA around the $58 mark. So I'd be also cognizant of those levels as well. NVDA could see potential for sympathy plays off of the AMKR earnings and also AMD earnings. So this one has been performing quite well and has seen a falling wedge. So we have broken out of this 50 or 588 level. We are retracing and holding that level quite well. I'd like to see if we can break this falling wedge and actually push for new all-time highs. So the AMKR earnings reports and the AMD earnings reports could potentially push this, as this is also a semiconductor stock as well. This one has been performing quite strong, so I'd like to see if we could actually get a push for new all-time highs. If not, we do have this support line around 588, and then we do have the 20 SMA around 580 and the 50 SMA around 555. So I'd be looking to those levels if we do get some downtrending price action. Alrighty, and then we have Square, which could see a sympathy play off of Visa earnings, which is earlier on in the week. So this one's looking interesting. It is also seeing a falling wedge, and this 242 level is a level to make note of. I'd like to see if we could hold this. It is above the 20 SMA and 50 SMA. So I'd like to see if we can actually break out to the upside and potentially push after we did make somewhat of a double top. So if we do break out here, I'd look to be seeing if Visa does get some price target upgrades and if we can actually see a good sympathy play off of this. So we do have the volume shelf ending around 277, and I believe the previous all-time high is around 283.16. So I'd be looking to see if we can actually start to push if we do have a good earnings report from Visa and if guidance is good. But if not, I'd like to see if we can actually break down below these SMAs and potentially come down to this 236 level, and then we do have a strong support around 200. But there's a lot of volume between 200 and 236, so we'd have to see a pretty dramatic move down for that to actually happen, for this 200 level to be tested. Alrighty, and then we have PayPal, which also could see a sympathy play off of the Visa earnings. So this one's setting up quite well as also. We are seeing somewhat of a bull flag, and then we do have this 275 resistance, and we have volume shelves ending around here, so there's not much volume up here. So if we do have a good earnings report from Visa, we could see a sympathy play where we break this downtrending resistance and then potentially test this 275 mark, break through there, and then after that, like I said, this volume shelf, they do pretty much end around here, so there's not much volume being held right here, and we could test the previous all-time high. Now, if we do see a bad earnings report from Visa and we see downtrending price action within these stocks, the digital payment stocks, then 260 is where these SMAs are holding up at. And then the next level I have is 254, and then we do have some volume shelves around 248 and 242. So if we do see a bad earnings report or price action is downwards, then I'd like to see if those levels can hold. Alright, so then we have Roblox and then Net, and then that will be the end of this. So Roblox just IPO'd recently. We are seeing that it is actually pinching, and the volume shelf is around 72, and then obviously we do have some volume shelves up to the 78 mark, and then after that volume kind of dries up. So I'd like to see if we could break out of this 72.50 area and actually see uptrending price action and potentially test new all-time highs. If not, I would like to see if this downtrending if this uptrending support line could actually break, and if we could see some downtrending price action. So after around this 67 to 68 range, we don't really have much volume, so therefore if we do break that level, we could definitely see a flush quite quickly and potentially test new lows. I believe the low is around 60.50, so we could potentially test that level if these levels do not hold. So the last one we're going to go over is Net, and this one did see a very good day on Friday. So this one's pinching, and then it did break out. I'd like to see if we could get above this $86 mark where the volume shelves actually do start to end, and the volume is pretty much dried up right here. So we could potentially, if we do get above this level, we could potentially test new all-time highs and see a strong move to the upside. Now we do have a support level that could potentially hold around the $79 mark if we actually do see a retracement. But overall, we are above the 20 and 50 SMAs. I would like to see if we do get good price action this upcoming week, if we can actually break this $86 mark. And like I said, if that does happen, there's not much volume up here, so we could potentially push for new all-time highs. But if we do get some downtrending price action, I'd like to see if we could hold this $79 mark. If not, we do have these SMAs, the 50 SMA around 74 and the 20 SMA around 72. So those are the plays that I'm looking for this upcoming week. These are the plays I see good potential in. These are not signals. You obviously have to do your own due diligence and create your own game plans. But I do see some good potential for this upcoming week. So I hope you guys all have a great week and stay green.